broadcast.
Okay, that's cool.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Let people enter the Zoom chat.
Cool.
Yay.
Hi. Oh, okay. Hi, everybody. I'm seeing familiar names.
Yeah.
Yay. Hi. I was very worried that no one would be joining me. But
No, we've got dozens of people here.
Hey, cool.
Yeah, it's already very well attended.
Okay, I will
All right.
stop blushing.
I'll introduce. My name is Chris. I'm from Powerhouse Arena, and welcome to Powerhouse Arena's virtual events. We're very excited to be hosting the launch of Francis Cha's If I Had Your Face. There it is. We are very proud to be having the launch in our store, and we are thrilled to be giving it a digital home for the time being.
Can we give a little shout out to the store, introduce the bar, how amazing.
Oh yeah. Yeah, the bar, whenever it'll be open again, we have a beautiful new salon area with a bar where the book launch was going to be, and it'll still be there when everybody's allowed back. But for now, we're all online, and you can buy the book on our website. There's a link in the chat, and yeah. So let me introduce Francis, and who will be joined in conversation by Hannah Bay. Hannah Bay is a freelance journalist and nonfiction writer, and a friend of Francis. Francis Cha is a former travel and culture editor for CNN in Seoul. She grew up in the United States, Hong Kong, and South Korea. A graduate of Dartmouth College and the Columbia University MFA writing program, she has written for The Atlantic and The Believer, and has lectured at Columbia University and Seoul National University, among others. She lives in Brooklyn with her husband and 2 daughters. And If I Had Your Face is her first novel. You'll be able to ask questions through the chat button on your screen, and I'll hand it over now.
Yay! Congratulations, Francis.
Thank you so much, Hannah. I was just talking to you earlier about how I'm so glad that I know you and I can be a little less nervous, and we're so comfortable with each other.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So for those of you who don't know, Francis and I are friends from when we lived back in Seoul, and Francis was my editor at CNN Travel, and she is the reason why I got all those great bylines, and she's a fantastic writer. And I just have to say, If I Had Your Face has been getting so much praise. I did collect some of the blurbs already. In Style has said if you read any book in April, it should be this one. And Vogue UK says it's essential reading. And I have been telling everyone that I feel like this book is the perfect antidote to quarantine loneliness, because it's about friendships, and it's set in the city that you and I have both called home before, Seoul. So tell me how you're feeling.
I mean, I was looking forward to the launch at Powerhouse for such a long time, because I had been to so many different book launches before, and I always dreamed of the day that my book would be out in the world. And I picked the bookstore with the bar because it would be the most festive. And I had all these ideas of bringing cookies in and things like that. So never, no one ever predicted this, but I'm still just so grateful that I'm published, and my editor is here tonight. Hi, Jennifer. And my team at my agency, and hi guys. And I just want to say thank you to them for giving me a chance and letting me publish. This is beyond my wildest dreams. So it means a lot. It means so much. And even through a pandemic, I'm still just in shock and very grateful.
It's wonderful. We have dozens of people here, and I think we're all just so excited for you. This book really stands out for so many different reasons, but it is one of the very, very first to be written in English and published in the US and set in contemporary Seoul. And you pay such close attention to all of the different settings in your book. There are parts that are set in another city called Cheongju, as well as Seoul. So can you tell us a little bit about how you kind of thought about the way that you would present setting in this novel?
Yeah, absolutely. The interesting thing about writing was that when I was in Korea, I would be writing scenes set in New York, and then when I'm in New York, I was going over the scenes in Korea, because I think you do need a little bit of distance from that location to process it and just examine what was interesting about that location and develop it into a setting. And so Seoul, I mean, I have always been, on the lookout for any kind of novel coming out in English set in contemporary Korea, and I just never, it never came, and I kept wanting to read about it in English, and I never did. And so, it took a really long time for me to actually attempt to write with Asian characters, with Korean characters specifically. And it's funny in retrospect now, because I'm so comfortable with it, I can't imagine going back from that. But before, it did, because I'd only been reading about white protagonists in white, and not, I mean, not just white, black, white, not Korean protagonists in English. It took me a long time to try to attempt it in my own work. And with Seoul, I just felt like there was so much, unexplored territory and very ripe for fiction, because it's such an extreme place. It's such a futuristic city, and it's very glittering with, all of its complications and its beauty, and, so many interesting things going on there. And after I started working at CNN, and I was the editor for CNN Go, which is kind of the travel culture, like dining scene, and all the fun, like quirky music, everything like that, which you're well aware of. But once I started covering that, just from my job, there were so many stories that I would kind of file away to use in my fiction, because you're covering things because they are extreme, and that's why it's newsworthy. And especially in Seoul, where there are so many global superlatives, I felt like I really wanted to tackle that in the story. And I chose to set it in the middle of Gangnam, like, the most glittering part of Seoul, because of how unusual that setting is, not only visually, but also just every alleyway has so many interesting little stores, things that you never see anywhere else. Everything from like 24-hour like pet hospitals to, I would see like dress rental places, 24-hour hair salons, 24-hour nail salons, and so many like things that you never see anywhere else, and all the pojangmacha completely packed with people no matter what time it is.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to tackle. And with the other cities, Cheongju is my mom was here. Hi, Ma.
Oh, yay. Hi, Francis's mom.
My brother and my sister-in-law, Jenny. Hi. And they laugh when I said it in Cheongju, because I have extended relatives there. My great aunt, who had 8 daughters and 2 sons, is from Cheongju, and we would stop by. And as a child, I don't know, it was very like 인상적, very, it was in my memory for a long time, because I felt like, very nostalgic for the kind of memories that we formed there, like going to the 한약방, the traditional medicine hospital that my great uncle would run. And I guess as a child, all these things like really stuck in my memory. And and I went to middle school outside of Seoul, and I would volunteer at an orphanage in my spare time. And that also was such a formative experience that I chose to tackle in the book.
Right. So for those of you who haven't read If I Had Your Face yet, Frances tells the story from 4 different narrators' points of view. And 3 of the narrators have, or 2 of the narrators, 3 of the characters have come out of this orphanage called the Loring Center. And what's really sharp about this novel is the way that these characters aren't born into wealth and status, but then try to make it in a city that is consumed with wealth and status in many ways. So I was particularly interested in that orphanage setting, and you know, what your experience was and how you came to do your research on that part of the book as well.
Yeah, so the orphanage that I volunteered at, it was half orphanage and half kind of a home for disabled youth and disabled adults. And I would, yeah, my experiences there, it was so long ago, but at the same time so formative. And ever since then, I kind of was almost obsessed with the orphanage part, you know, the narratives that come out of Korea, based on largely the Holt Center that I volunteered at when I was there. And I was very interested in exploring characters who are not born into wealth and status, like you said, and therefore they rely more on each other to create a new kind of family. And I think that's very true, you know, in modern life. Because the nuclear family is so small these days and everyone is scattered all over the globe, and with you kind of create your own family, and the people that you end up being very close to, it's like, you know, I haven't seen my mom in so long. I feel so bad that I wasn't there for All Boy and Hour yesterday. Thanks for cooking, Chris and Jenny. But I feel like we do create a new family, especially with close friends, and that's such a huge defining characteristic of Korean culture, like the loyal, deeply loyal friendships that people have. And that's often what gets people into trouble, you know, for nepotism, when they reach higher ranks. And I always think, it's a personal opinion of mine, that nepotism, honestly, it comes from, you know, a very, like, in a way, a good place, because you feel such loyalty to the people that you grew up with and that you went to school with, and you do things that you shouldn't do to give them a heads, you know, like an advantage. And we see that at every level in society because of that.
And we see that in the book as well.
Yes, we see that in the book as well.
Do you want to tell folks about some of the instances in which people get into trouble because of these connections?
Yeah, so let's see. Well, my mind is completely blank now. We can talk about like the friendships, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I think like people do crazy things for love, for example, in your book. Like Miho, for example, she's one of the women who comes out of the orphanage, and she vaults into this artistic bohemian life, and gets this art scholarship in New York City, and starts to enter this other echelon of Koreans, and forms these very intimate bonds, but there's a lot of heartbreak along the way.
Yes, Miho is very dear to my heart. And by the way, just a note about names. I spent a lot of time trying to hone in on names that would be mellifluous to the English ear. And it's actually quite difficult to do. And I feel like Korean Americans in the States probably get teased a lot at school, because sometimes they are not, you know, they're kind of jarring to the English ear. And Miho, I've been getting questions like, isn't that a Japanese name? I didn't realize, but I actually knew several Mihos growing up in Korea. in my school. So it is a Korean name if anyone's curious about that. And yeah, Miho is a character who I'm very interested in contemporary art in Korea. I love going to galleries and museums, and that's something that my mom is very interested in, and she would always take me along. And so I grew up kind of being very interested in that world. And I think the art coming out of Korea now is so unusual and so just stunning. And I really wanted to delve into that world through a character. And it honestly, like, I want to illustrate, I want to, have a slide and an illustrative footnote for every reference to Korean contemporary art, because I feel like I can't do the art justice with words. But Jiyoung Lee, so I interviewed a lot of artists. They were so kind, I would just call them up and be like, hi, I really am interested in contemporary art and I'm writing a novel, and how ridiculous that sounds. And they would, they would share their valuable time with me, kind to show me their work and talk about their work and answer these very random questions I would have. When you're writing a book, you have all these ridiculous random questions that sound so crazy when you ask the people you're interviewing, like, oh, so what time do you eat and how do you eat in your studio, or things like that. You have to kind of work it into the chapters as well. I feel like I'm getting very off track.
No, I mean, it's really
sorry.
fascinating. And the note about the names of your characters, I mean, that really stood out to me too. Like, I think probably Sujin is one of the characters, and that's one of like the more common names among like Koreans today. But yeah, Miho, Cutie, Wonna, I feel like they're very unusual names that I didn't encounter often when I was living in Korea.
Yeah, it definitely took a lot of research to kind of hit upon what I thought would sound not jarring to things. And even now I am getting feedback, with Instagram. It's so interesting that people are tagging me and like sharing all these, real time, like as they are reading, they give me instant feedback. And I feel like that must be so new to writers today, and you would never have had that. You would kind of publish your book and have no idea what people were thinking, apart from the professional reviews in magazines and newspapers. But like now they're coming in very thick and fast, and DMs and like tags and stuff. Like, I can't tell these Asian characters apart, sometimes, and be like, oh, okay, thank you for sharing. Like, which is interesting. But I've also been very so touched by a lot of the feedback that people have shared with me, and it's been just such an incredible experience to have people, adoptees, reaching out to me and telling me a little bit about how this was very interesting to them, and other and not necessarily Koreans, but people who are interested in other cultures.
Definitely. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about how you kind of interpreted Korea, contemporary Korea, to people who might not have any context, and, how you thought about using language, especially, you talk about how you focused on like the melodious qualities of the names. And can you tell us about how you thought about the Korean language in general while writing this book?
Absolutely. So every reference, it took a lot of thought, because if I am saying, for example, a dish, do I want to write in odengtang, or do I want to write, chewy fish cake? And that's something that almost every chapter definitely had, all these Korean specific Korean terminologies and dishes and references, and I would have to try to contextualize it in a way that someone like you reading it, I don't want you to be turned off, because you're very familiar with everything Korean, and I don't want it to be like, oh, this book is not for me. It's meant for someone who has no idea about Korean culture, but I wanted it to be meaningful for, you know, at no matter the range and familiarity with Korea, you would be interested.
Definitely.
That was definitely something I spent a lot of time thinking about, and my training at CNN was so crucial to that in retrospect, because every single day I would be writing. You know, I'm a Korean person speaking Korean, interviewing Koreans in Korea, but when I write an article, I'm writing as if, you know, I'm writing for the person who perhaps has no context of Korea, and I'm contextualizing the backstory of how this extreme story came to be and why we're featuring it now, and what kind of background gave rise to this event. And so constantly contextualizing for however many hours a day at work, and then having my bosses very brutally edit everything, you know, every 2 hours. And they would be, so I got very used to the editing process,
Right.
as well as contextualizing. So I think that I'm not, I try not to be like precious with my work as much as possible. And I really value my editor's feedback. Thank you, Jennifer. So and my weekly workshop. So when I came back to New York,
Mm-hmm.
I had a weekly workshop at the Center for Fiction with a lot of, or not a lot, two other women who were working on their stories, and they were not Korean. One had, I think she had never been to Asia before. The other one was half no, she was married to a Japanese man. But so, you know, I would constantly be workshopping with them, like, oh, did you understand what 상견례 means? Like 상견례 is
Like the meetup of the
of the
future
family,
spouses, right, and their families.
right? Like I say 상견례, but I don't explain it. I just contextualize it. Can you, after reading the chapter, understand what that means? And then they would say yes. Like they would say, oh, does it mean, you know, a meetup of families before getting, you know, getting married? And then I'd be kind of reassured that my thoughts were coming across. But I think, you know, they were very careful readers. They're very literary readers. So I think this might not be true for every reader. I'm sure there's still such a barrier. And I'm very grateful to the readers who are coming. You know, it's very hard to really open up like this, like to go in and read about a culture that you're not familiar with and be plunged straight into it. So I'm just very grateful that
Yeah.
there's readership
Well,
at all.
of course. And now I think more than ever, there is such an interest in Korea and so many different aspects of the country, like K-beauty, fashion, art, and gaming too. There's like this real fervor for these things that Korea does best, you know? Video games kind of make their way into your novel toward the later end. Can you talk a little bit about your research into that world and why you wanted to bring it in?
So at CNN, I interviewed several celebrity gamers, and that was such a crazy world.
Yeah, we did one together.
Oh my God! Wait, were you the one who did you come with me to that interview?
Yes, with
Fair?
NST.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
Oh
and you
my
were
God.
translating for me because my Korean wasn't good enough.
Oh my God, that was so much fun. I completely forgot about that. That's so awesome.
Yeah, it was like this dorm for a pro
Oh,
gaming team.
yes, that was wild. So there was a dorm. Let's describe it. So there's a dorm, and then everyone has their own terminal. Everyone lives there. They have a manager who cooks for them 24/7, and they're gaming and sponsored by these big companies. I think one was Pepsi, right?
Mm-hmm.
Pepsi, and then I think Samsung. They had all these sponsorships, and they're making, you know, hundreds and thousands of dollars. And it was such a crazy new world. And so I I grew up going to PC방, not for gaming purposes, but for other purposes, actually just for ticketing for K-pop concerts. You have to, you know, when you're ticketing for a K-pop concert, you have to go to the place where the internet is the fastest so that you can get in.
And would you have multiple computers going to get tickets?
Yeah, yeah. I would be there with 3 friends, and we would just be like clicking like crazy because the tickets sell out so fast. And that's kind of embarrassing to recount that now. But so I wouldn't game, but I would, you know, often go, probably like drag my brother out from one of them. Hi, Chris. And then friends would, you know, meet up there for this and that. And that was always such a landscape that you really don't see outside of Asia. You know, the everyone in these dark terminals like eating komnamyeon and and having this whole other second life outside of home and school. And so where were we? Oh, right. So
The video games.
A friend who started working for Riot Games in Korea, and he one time invited me and a couple other friends to have dinner, and he's like, "Oh, you know, you'll really like this place. We built a new thing. Just come and check it out." And so I went, and this was last summer, and it really blew my mind. It's a $50 million facility built by Riot Games Korea, and they have like a secret crypt like room where we had dinner, and you like open, it's like you Dungeons and Dragons kind of thing, and you go in there, and there are dragons, you know, of all forms, and you have a giant arena where live games can be watched live every week, several times a week. And interestingly, apparently the majority of the audience is female of these live games. It's like 60% female, he told me. And so and I found out later after dinner that he had been named the CEO. He just had neglected to
Oh my
tell me.
God.
He had been named the CEO. And so we toured the facilities, and it just really was so crazy. And I am, thank you. My husband just got me water.
So nice.
And so that was such a crazy thing that I had to add it into the last chapter very late. And I wanted to capture like that aspect. I feel like that's such a big part of Korean culture as well, gaming and the rise of esports.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, I don't know why ESPN isn't just showing esports right now. Actually, they're showing Korean baseball. I don't know.
Right.
But esports should be a thing right now.
Totally.
Yeah, they should. Totally.
It's like making its way, you know, into wider consciousness, especially here in the States.
Yeah. We got a question. What groups were you ticketing for? Yes. So, okay. Big Bang was one of them. Definitely I was a big fan of Big Bang. But once I started going to K-pop concerts, I got so into the culture of K-pop concerts. And Hannah, did you say you've been
I haven't been to a K-pop concert.
So it's very different from other music, you know, other non-K-pop bands. They do a lot of fan service, what they call fan service. So they have like solo stages where they dress up like crazy and play covers of bands, and they have these skits and plays and funny, you know, and variations of songs that you don't necessarily see. And there's such a lot of joking going on, and it's very addictive. It's just so fun. And so I started going to every K-pop concert possible. It didn't matter who it was. Like I've been to Super Junior. I think I went to Wonder Girls. Yeah, like every band that was big in my day, which is I guess 10 to 5 years ago now.
Yeah, I think that's like second wave K-pop, you know, like post HOT but pre BTS.
Exactly. I don't know BTS. I can't tell like each member. Whereas
The seven.
yeah, the groups that came out when I was really into K-pop, I would know everyone's last name. I would know where they were from. I would know what their favorite foods are.
Yeah. We are getting a couple other questions. We got one earlier in the Q&A that is, how do you deal with writer's block? And I know that you went through many life changes while writing this novel. So can you tell us a little bit about your writing process?
My writing process really changed from when I was in MFA and I had all the time in the world and I was not writing. You know, I was watching a lot of K-dramas and reading a lot. But I did start the book during MFA. And then when I was working full time, I would kind of try to carve out some time on the weekends, very occasionally, to try to write. But that was really hard. But I would still like write all these notes of what I wanted to embellish on in fiction later, because and I would have a folder of what I thought was interesting and what I wanted to use. And then so that was, you know, every 2 weeks or so I would try to write. But then after I quit my job at CNN, and I had about 7 months in between giving birth to my first child, that was the only time when I was really writing the book full time. And then when I had kids, it's just been like I've really had to find, you know, every minute that I can, I just sit down. I just remember taking my computer down to the laundry room in when I was living near Columbus Circle, because the laundry takes a long time and our elevators were always broken and it would drive me crazy. So I would just bring it down and right on top of the washer dryer. And it was actually great because there's no Wi-Fi down there, and it just forces you to work rather than goof off online.
Oh, totally. And you showed on your Instagram that when you would go back to Korea, you would carve out all these little moments between the meetings that you would have, and, you know, taking your girls to play dates and whatnot. Like, you would just have your laptop with you at all times and just like work in these random office lobbies or like hotel lobbies, or, you know, just all these beautiful quiet spaces in Seoul.
Oh my gosh, the study cafes in Seoul, they're 독서실, you know, they are just, in fact, I feel very bad because sometimes I'm typing and the typing sounds loud. So then some of them have special rooms just for laptops, and you
Oh,
have to
wow.
come there because you can't disturb the students who are studying for the college entrance exam. But I absolutely love those spaces, and just everyone being so intense around you and you know that they're really, it's their one shot for the year, and you don't want to disturb them, but it's like contagious, their energy and their fervor and their desperation. And I'm just so grateful to be past the past going to apply to college.
Yes.
As you know, having gone to TJ.
Yeah.
And so that's a really cool space to write in. Jennifer says, "Oh, someone's watching from a study cafe in Seoul
Right now.
That's amazing.
Early in the morning too.
Yeah, which area of Seoul? I'm so curious."
Yeah.
And who are my editor says,
Shincheon.
I used to teach in Shincheon, so I would take the bus from CNN. I would take it to Ide and Yeonde and teach there. Oh, that's so cool.
Right. Yeah. So Jennifer asked who your main literary influences are. Oh, and this person in Shincheon is at Yeonde.
And my main literary influences, I mean, I've written extensively about the Joy Luck Club because that was Amy Chan's she allowed me to think about contextualizing, Asian experiences and writing them in English. And I just remember her, even all the Chinese words I memorized. I memorized all the Chinese words she used, and she would say, oh, there's no English word for this, but it kind of means this and this and this. And I loved the way that she would do that and convey how it's so difficult to translate a lot of concepts from one culture to another, but you are still trying. And it really changed my perspective on everything. And you saw my copy of the Joy Luck Club, it's in tatters.
Yes, missing both covers.
Yeah, but like with this book, I always had a rotation of 4 or 5 different books I would take around with me when I was writing this. And it depends on what I'm stuck on at the time. If it's something like, oh, I think I want to devote more time to differentiating voice for different characters, I would refer to Charles Baxter's Feast of Love, because I felt like he really, his book also has multiple narrators in the first person, but every voice is so distinct and so wonderful. And he pulls it off just incredibly beautifully. And so I would do that. And then American Wife by Curtis Sittenfeld. I mean, I have also read that to tatters because there's such like introspection. It's such an introspective book that I loved. I just absolutely love the internal monologue in that book. And then, because I actually originally thought of this as an interconnected group of short stories.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I actually didn't think it was a novel. I just kept writing stories. And it was surprising for me when I went back. I had 5 narrators in the beginning, and I went back to the first one after the first 5 stories. And I was like, oh, do I really want to go back to her? Okay, I'll just try continuing that. And one narrator was cut out completely. And is my second book.
Yay!
Hi, Jennifer. And then, yes, because of that, I refer to Olive Kittredge a lot
Mm-hmm.
and Elizabeth Strout. So once I got hooked on Olive Kittredge, I read through Elizabeth Strout, everything she's written, and I would refer to her books a lot. Lucy Barton was a huge influence as well. And The Blind Assassin by Margaret Atwood. I had to buy 3 different copies of that one because it just spilled coffee and like pour that one to bits as well. All over it.
Yeah, we talked about how when you were in your MFA program, you read very widely, and you've mentioned that you kind of needed the decade that you spent living in addition to writing this book to get that life experience. Because I mean, when we met, we were these young professional women in Seoul, and now we're married ajumas, and you're a mom of 2. And I feel like there are these different aspects of you in all of the different characters. Like Wonna is the character that you voiced for your audiobook, and her experience struggling to become a mother, I felt like was a lot of you kind of writing from the heart.
Yes, Wonna is really dear to me. I went through a very difficult time postpartum, and it was very difficult. And I think motherhood is very fraught for so many reasons. But when I was pregnant, I was very worried about whether everything is going okay. And you go through different tests every month, and I would come back from every visit like absolutely distraught if there was some test that they said was there's like a millionth of a chance that something might go wrong, and I would just fall apart. And so one of the scenes I had written in between those visits when I was pregnant, and so a lot of that kind of anxiety is present in there, I think. And that the whole motherhood aspect of Wana and how she kind of encapsulates all her hopes and dreams into her child is something that I think all Asian children are very aware of. And the filial piety is such a huge concept in Asia for that reason. We carry the burden and the gratitude at the same time. And that was something that the Joy Luck Club also discussed in great detail. And so my that's kind of, it's a very personal character for me.
Yeah. So now the questions are coming fast and furious. And Tabitha asks, would you say that these characters depicted in your story are realistic? As in, people currently in Korea could read it and say, yes, these are very believable females.
Well, we would have to ask the people in Korea.
Yes.
I mean, I think so. It was my obviously my intent to make it as authentic as possible at the granular level for every character, and I tried as to the best of my ability to make it so. I think the thing that I encounter in interviews today from the Western media, because I'm constantly going through press right now, that it's been interesting to kind of have them think that these women represent all Korean women, and that's just completely not true. They're just individuals in a society. And Cutie, for example, I chose to make a very extreme example. Like, she's not representative of Korean women, in totality. Even her mother is unusual, because her mother doesn't want her to learn how to cook, because she doesn't want her children to be relegated to the kitchen domesticity. And so I don't think Cutie is representative. Do I think that there are cuties in Korea? Yes, I know for a fact that there are, and I would sit next to them in the hair salon wondering why they're getting this discount. And when I would ask my stylist, oh, how can I get that discount, because she has such a discount, and the stylist would be like, oh, that's just for onni들. What are you talking about? It turned out they were room salon girls. So that's a whole other side of how I kind of went down that rabbit hole of the relationship between room salon girls and hairstylists. And I would see it in person when I would go at a certain time.
Yeah. And I have to say, as somebody who lived in Korea for quite a long time, I felt like I recognized so much of the people that I loved, of the places that I loved in your book. Like, you took us to places that that everyday Koreans don't always go to, but I thought they were totally precise, believable characters. And I kept turning the pages because I wanted to know what was going to happen to them.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So Martina asks, do you think it's possible to write a novel while working a full-time job?
Yes, I know people who have done it. It was really hard for me, but at the same time, having 2 kids is kind of like a full-time job.
Yes.
In some ways, I think if you are desperate, which I was, that desperation is the biggest factor rather than time constraint. And so when I had all the time in the world, I wasn't writing as much as I did when I didn't have any time at all. And that desperation was the biggest factor for completing the book.
Yeah. Another anonymous question asker asks, along the lines of family, how does your husband support your writing career? He gives you water during the Q&As.
My husband is, he has been the rock I have to say, I'm just so grateful to everything that he has done for me throughout this process. And it's everything from, literally he has read every page of this book probably 5 times each, if not more. And he is like, under his process is like underlining every single word and tossing words back at me saying, do you think this is the right word? Do you think this is the right concept? And um, and to the other emotional support when I'm going through a really dark time before my book deal about, do you think I'll ever get published? And just thinking that I was right. I had been spending all this time and energy on something that might never see the light of day. So just he was the rock through that all, and he saw all the ups and downs, and he's seeing all the ups and downs these days, even post publication, like no bookstores are open, and then I start crying, and he's like, oh, it's okay, it's, yeah, he says very comforting things.
Oh, and since there are no bookstores open, this is exactly why folks should buy from Powerhouse Arena, who's hosting this event so generously. And they actually have a special website up during this time. It's powerhousebookstores.com. So that's different from their usual website. But yes, please buy from independent bookstores because they're what makes programming like this possible. Yeah. So another question is, what is the main thing that you would want non-Asian Americans to take away from your book?
That's very interesting. I think just so non-Asian Americans meaning non-Asians or non-Asian, non-Asians, right? I would assume.
Yeah, I'm guessing non-Asians.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I encounter, I think, I want to proceed cautiously here, but I do encounter, I think, a lot of judgment when it comes to things like plastic surgery, for example, because Koreans, it's just a widely often discussed and referenced fact that Korean women do get plastic surgery. And I just think that, I would ask them to reserve judgment, and that there are very real and non-frivolous, non-vain reasons for people who choose to make those choices. And I do get kind of uncomfortable the way that the book is sometimes brought up and the way that it's kind of summarized in this context, because I would hope that people would see it's more complicated than that being just a vain choice or
right.
So that kind of thing. But I also just that there are very friendships are very important in Asian culture. The creation of the new kind of family. I would hope that they just encounter a different culture and that they're not familiar with, and they come away with empathy for people of another culture, which is why I read extensively. I read books that are set in other cultures because of that reason. I feel like I come away with a lot of empathy that I didn't know what people were going through before they read it.
Right. Your whole life you've been reading books from outside your culture. So those obviously touched you and inspired you to become a writer. So I know that these characters, they have been written with so much nuance, and you can feel their motivations and see why they would make these decisions, for hopes of a better life. And in the reviews and interviews that I've been reading, it seems like so many people connect to the universality of what friendship means and how it can buoy people during uncertain times. And that's why I think this book is especially timely and important.
Thank you so much, Hannah.
You're
By the way,
welcome.
I want to reintroduce Hannah in case you guys haven't read her bio, but she is very lucky that she's donating her valuable time to this right now because she's a rock star. She is ex-State Department, ex-CNN, ex-Newsday, and she was the president of the Asian American Journalists Association New York chapter. And she's working on an incredible memoir.
Thank you.
Seen through her essays that are just quite incredible, and I'm so excited to read it when it comes out. I wonder when that will be.
Thank you. It's the dream. So there are two questions. Thank you so much for that very, very kind hype session. There are two questions about the fifth narrator who was cut and the second book that you're working on. Can you tell the audience a little bit about your second book?
Sure. The fifth narrator was a returned adoptee, and she grew up in Boston, and I set it all in Boston. And it was actually the narrator that I spent the most time on. I spent years on her. And that was the first iteration. So I started that in college. And she is now going to be kind of the foundation for the next book, which is more along the lines of literary horror.
Ooh, something that Koreans excel at.
Exactly. I'm like, yeah, it's exactly like Park Chan-wook, exactly like that. But it's based on a story that I heard my uncle and my mom discussing, this folklore from their childhood growing up. And it's this like intergenerational horror themed folklore that is very, very traditionally Korean, but it will be in the modern world. And so that's what I'm working on ostensibly.
I'm excited. That's awesome. So there's a question that if your book was going to be made into a movie, which I believe it's in development, right? Like not the movie, but possibly a series. Like I think it's been optioned, right?
It has been optioned. I'm not allowed to say much at present, but
okay.
Optioned.
But this audience member asks, which stars would you want to cast for the movie?
Oh,
let's say dream scenario.
So many dream stars. I would have to say, well, right off the bat, this is kind of controversial, but Tiffany Young from Girls' Generation, I would want her to, she's going to be going into acting. I think she's interested in acting. So just dream scenario, Tiffany in some aspect, and well, other actors that I would dream of. Well, I don't think a lot of the people would be familiar with them, but I did have certain kinds of faces in mind when I was writing their descriptions, and some of them, I actually don't even. Kim Tae-ri would be like a dream as well. She's someone.
Is she the one in Hi Bye Mama?
I don't know. So can anyone in the help us out? She was in The Handmaiden.
Oh my gosh, yes.
So incredible.
Is she cutie? Is that the face?
No, I would think she would be more Ara.
Oh.
That's just how I think about it.
Wow. It's such a fun exercise.
Yes, she was in Mr. Sunshine too, which I absolutely loved. I love that so much. Oh, the fun relation to my book, Mr. Sunshine, which is a Netflix show. It's a historical drama that's Korean that my mom watched, so I saw along with her. But the estate that Ara's from is based on a real estate there called Unbo의 집, and Mr. Sunshine was filmed there. So the Lee Byung-hun's, I think his office, because he represented the American consulate. Oh, connection to you. And that was filmed at Unboejip, which is where like the centuries-old Hanok estate that Ara grows up in, and she escapes from because she wants to create a new life with, you know, kind of cutting her ties to her past. That's the place where Mr. Sunshine was filmed.
Yeah, it's a really interesting segment of your book where you go into, you know, all the girls go to the Hanok complex and see where Ara grew up, and it's kind of lifting a little bit of the mystery around you know, her life. And I don't want to say too much, but the way she is, why she is. So somebody asks, anonymous attendee asks, who is on the cover of the book?
Oh, she is a Korean model. This was, yeah, it wasn't shot for the book. It was a fashion editorial, but she is a Korean model.
Very cool. And then we have a question that asks, what drives the characters, the women? You know, cosmetic surgeries and room salon work are no cakewalk, yet feel so optional. Or is this my privilege talking? Do these women, as orphans with little safety net, feel that they have no choice? So yes, this is a very big question of what drives the different characters.
Wait, what drive? Okay. I think for them, it's not about some long-term ambition. It's really, I wanted to capture what I think the older generations in Korea worry today about the younger generations, which is they don't think about the future, you know, and that's something that was kind of encapsulated in a passing remark by a client of Ara's in the hair salon, that the younger generations don't think of tomorrow, they only think of today. And that's something that I encountered in my interviews as well, talking about not the millennials, but the younger generations. And it's honestly like there's a big, of course, the coronavirus landscape will have affected this and to a degree that we won't know how, but the unemployment rate was very high among youth. There's this prohibitive real estate prices. So, you know, if you have even if you get a really good salaried position and you save up for a long time, real estate prices are so prohibitive that people are not, you know, moving out of their families' homes. They're not getting married. And so what kind of results from that is this new freedom among the youth where, you know, you're older, but you're single, but you have a job, so you have expendable income. And you don't necessarily worry about, or like you do worry, but you just have no idea what it's going to look like because it's unprecedented in Korean history. And I think that's like for these women, they're just really trying to survive day to day. You know, if they get cut from this job, it's going to be so hard for them to get another job. And so I actually think it's a matter of survival. And it's not, I don't think there's a lot of optionality necessarily, especially for cutie and other, you know, workers of that nature. And it's such a vicious cycle where psychologically it's hard to come out of, even though, you know, you may be able to physically walk away and have some kind of escape, but psychologically you feel like you're locked into the system. Mm-hmm. And that's the hard part.
Yeah. And we definitely see that in the characters' trajectories, how, you know, one thing leads to another and it all kind of snowballs to heighten that tension. Well, we're at the end of our hour, and I am so grateful to you, Frances, for having me in conversation with you. And
You,
truly,
thank you, everybody. I'm so grateful to everyone here. Thank you for caring at all about the book and all of your support. It really just means the world to me. So thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, Francis. And thank you everyone who asked questions.
Rita. All right.
thank you, Chris. Thank you, Powerhouse.
If anybody missed any of the event, we'll have it on YouTube soon, and we'll be sharing it.
Really? Okay.
If that's okay with you. If it's not, we can.
No, it's cool.
Just let me know. And then just please buy the book through the event page or the link in the chat. It's every book helps us put on more free events, and it's 10% off for a limited time. But thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Make a difference in a debut novelist's life. Buy this book.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Yeah.